Greetings to you this morning. My name is Omega Burkhardt. I am the ministerial intern here at the Unitarian Universalist Church in Rockford, Illinois, and I am thrilled to be with you today. We are streaming live this Sunday morning, October 18th at 10 a.m. Of course, you may be joining us at a different time, in which case we're thrilled that you sought us out. We welcome you and all that you bring with you today. For those in our congregation or friends of this community, we're so glad that you came here to join us in this spirit of community. You may be new to our congregation, in which case you may be coming with a spirit of searching and wonder. Welcome to you as well. You are welcomed today, even if you're coming with frustrations, if you're angry, upset, sad, worried. Welcome to you. If you join us today because you are in need of worship, or perhaps you are a member of another Unitarian Universalist congregation, or of no other congregation at all, we welcome you as well. Whoever you are and whatever brings you to us, welcome. We are coming to you live from the sanctuary this morning. With me today is Reverend Mitra, Rahnema, our distinguished pulpit guest for the morning. Tim Anderson, our colleague in worship and the music director, is also here with us today, as is Autumn Powell, our office manager, who is running the tech for us this morning. Our worship associate, Amy Brandon, has recorded a testimony. We will be playing that for you in a little while. And Chris Ainsworth, our membership coordinator, is joining in from home on the Facebook feed. Lindsay Dunn is off this morning. And of course, Reverend Matthew Johnson is on sabbatical. He will return for a weekend in November and then will return permanently at the end of December. During the service today, if you're watching on Facebook, please feel free to comment there as a way to build community. But keep in mind, it is public, so be careful with how you engage there. If you're new to our congregation, you can like our Facebook page, or you can go to our website and sign up for our newsletter there. So at this moment, I will pause for a moment of centering, and I'll ring our bell, and we'll begin worship together. This morning we'll continue singing our hymn of the month. Here we have gathered number 360. Please rise in body or spirit at home and join us in the singing.
Gathered side by side, circle of kinship, come and step inside. May all who seek here find a kindly word. May all who speak here feel they have been heard. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Here we have gathered, called to celebrate days of our lifetime, matters small and great. We of all ages, women, children, men, infants and sages, sharing what we can. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Life has its battles, sorrows and regret. But in the shadows, let us not forget, we who now gather know each other's pain. Kindness can heal us, as we give, we gain. Sing now in friendship this our heart's own song.
The flaming chalice is a symbol of our faith, a beacon of truth, a fire for justice, and a warmth for the soul. I will light our chalice here, and you may light your home chalice or the chalice of your heart. First, let us speak together the covenant of this church, and then we will join in singing the chalice response song. Love is the spirit of this church, and reason is its guide. To dwell together in peace, to seek truth in freedom, and to serve human need. This is our covenant.
May love shine forth through us today. May light of reason guide our way. May beauty, truth, and joy become a flame that burns in every one.
Our theme this morning is grace. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. The first time I can recall ever hearing Amazing Grace, I would have been about 8 or 9 years old. It wasn't in church, but rather I was watching a movie with my mom, the movie Silkwood. For those of you who might not remember the movie, it was released in the early 80s, and it was based on the life and death of Karen Silkwood. The haunting version of Amazing Grace at the end has stuck with me until this day. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Of course, now that memory of that song, that first time I heard it, so powerful, has been stitched together with other memories. Memories like watching that movie with my mom, now deceased, the house that we lived in at the time, my earliest reckonings with what grace even meant, and a certain nostalgia, a longing that even my young self seemed to recognize in Meryl Streep's rendition of that song. So many layers to my understanding of grace now. Chance, a flash of understanding, some sort of saving moment, perhaps the divine or sacred, but not necessarily, maybe a touch of serendipity or the synchronicities that I witness almost daily. Like a quilt, layers upon layers of stitching and fabric, patterns and designs handed down through the ages from the ancestors. Innovation, of course, also serendipity, but also meticulous planning. Moments of grace arrive to me and make themselves known to me, wake me up to all that is happening and could possibly happen in my life. Let us join in worship today, and let us consider all the ways in which grace has made our lives richer, more meaningful, and more sacred.
Joy and peace are in this hour, here not in another place. Here in this beloved flower, now in this beloved face.
Since Lindsay is gone this morning, it is my pleasure to read to you the story for today. Today I'll be reading Amazing Grace. Grace was a girl who loved stories. She didn't mind if they were read to her or told to her or made up in her own head. She didn't care if they were in books or movies or out of Nana's long memory. Grace just loved stories. After she heard them, and sometimes while they were still going on, Grace would act them out, and she always gave herself the most exciting part. Grace went into battle as Joan of Arc and wove a wicked web as Anansi the spider. She hid inside the wooden horse at the gates of Troy, and she went exploring for lost kingdoms. She sailed the 7 seas with a peg leg and a parrot. She was Hiawatha sitting by the shining big sea water, and Mowgli in the backyard jungle. Most of all, Grace loved to act out adventure stories and fairy tales. When there was no one else around, Grace played all the parts herself. She set out to seek her fortune with no companion but her trusty cat, and found a city with streets paved in gold. Or she was Aladdin, rubbing his magic lamp to make the genie appear. Sometimes she could get Ma and Nana to join in when they weren't too busy. Then she was Dr. Grace, and their lives were in her hands. One day, Grace's teacher said they would do the play Peter Pan. Grace knew who she wanted to be. When she raised her hand, Raj said, "You can't be Peter. That's a boy's name." But Grace kept her hand up. "You can't be Peter Pan," whispered Natalie. "He isn't black." But Grace kept her hand up. "All right," said the teacher, "lots of you want to be Peter Pan, so we'll have auditions next week to choose parts." She gave them words to learn. When Grace got home, she seemed sad. "What's the matter?" asked Ma. "Raj said I can't be Peter Pan because I'm a girl." "Well, that just shows what Raj knows," said Ma. "A girl can be Peter Pan if she wants to." Grace cheered up, and then later she remembered something else. "Natalie said I can't be Peter Pan because I'm black," she said. Ma looked angry. But before she could speak, Nana said, "It seems that Natalie is another one who don't know anything. You can be anything you want, Grace, if you put your mind to it." On Saturday, Nana told Grace they were going out. In the afternoon, they caught a bus and a train into town. Nana took Grace to a grand theater. The sign outside read, "Rosalie Wilkins in Romeo and Juliet," in sparkling lights. "Are we going to the ballet?" Nana asked Grace. "We are, honey, but first I want you to look at this picture." Grace looked up and saw a beautiful ballerina in a tutu. Above the dancer, it said, "Stunning new Juliet." "That one is little Rosalie from back home in Trinidad," said Nana. "Her granny and me, we grew up together on the island. She's always asking me, do I want tickets to see her Rosalie dance? So this time I said yes." After the ballet, Grace played the part of Juliet, dancing in her room with her imaginary tutu. I can be anything I want, she thought. On Monday, the class met for auditions to choose who was the best for each part. When it was Grace's turn to be Peter, she knew exactly what to do and all the words to say. She had been Peter Pan all weekend. She took a deep breath and imagined herself flying. When it was time to vote, the class chose Raj to be Captain Hook and Natalie to be Wendy. There was no doubt who would be Peter Pan. Everyone voted for Grace. You were fantastic, whispered Natalie. The play was a big success, and Grace was an amazing Peter Pan. After it was all over, she said, I feel as if I could fly all the way home. You probably could, said Ma. Yes, said Nana. If Grace put her mind to it, she can do anything she wants. Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I enjoyed reading it. We will continue to join in worship online for the foreseeable future. We do have some upcoming events. You can check them out on our social media pages, Facebook. You can also, as I said, sign up for our newsletter if you'd like. I would like to draw your attention in particular to a very important event coming up soon, the first Unitarian Universalist Rockford Annual Winter Pandemic Online Auction, Marketplace, and Art Fair. It will be taking place in December. If you would like more details, please find the information that will be posted in Kairos and in other areas. You can also email, and this is a long one, auctionchair2020, that's all one word, auctionchair2020@gmail.com. Is there some service that you could offer? Perhaps think a little bit about that. Maybe it's a yoga class or some leaf raking, online shopping, or other errands that you could help with in our community. Please let the committee chair know by November 4th, auctionchair2020@gmail.com. In the meantime, since we are not meeting together in person, check in with one another. If there is someone you normally chat with in coffee hour, or perhaps someone you know in this congregation who is a little bit isolated, reach out. Give a phone call or drop a note or maybe a text. We will now take up an offering to support the work of justice in this congregation. 80% of what is collected today will go to an organization called Al Otro Lado. It is a not-for-profit binational group that organizes direct legal services for indigent deportees, migrants, and refugees. They have a particular focus also in the efforts to protect families and familial rights of migrants. Thank you for your generosity this morning. You can give online or by texting the number on your screen, or you can go to www.uurockford.org/donate and be sure to select Share the Plate. The offering will now be given and received.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Amy, and I am your worship associate today. I've been tasked with discussing grace, as I know it, and how it relates to emotional intelligence. So grace for me is equal to compassion. I came to know grace after my brother Stan died by suicide. Obviously, this was an exceptionally trying time in my family. Most people wanted to help, and for them, that meant prayer. I heard so many people say that they were going to pray for my brother, or me, or my family, or some combination of those. This was when grace first entered my life. I was angry with a lot of things at that time, and people offering prayers to me, a non-believer, felt maddening. It was admittedly hard to see past my indignation when they said those words, "I'll pray for you." I wanted to say not nice things to them, but then a thought occurred to me, a simple thought really, that at first had escaped me. My brother was an exceptional human. He had many people in the world that loved him, as I did. These people loved him. In loving him, they meant me no harm. Then it happened. I received a bit of grace. I realized that their offers were about their feelings and them doing the best that they could to make themselves feel better. Obviously, they wanted me to feel better too, but I was not the only person that had lost my brother. They had relationships with him, and they had lost him too. And this realization helped me to see that grace is about compassion. Compassion for myself, for my brother, for those that in their own way were trying to help both me and themselves. Letting grace into your life is, for me, to let compassion into your life. To embrace the offerings of love and compassion that you are receiving and recognizing that in order to receive it, you also must give it. So today, I continue to challenge myself to find ways to let grace into my life. And I hope that you will too. Thanks.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell our story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy grace. When our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we share the silence of sacred space, and the God of our heart stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place.
Good morning. It's good to be back with you. I want to begin by thanking you, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Rockford, and the Reverend Matthew Johnson for inviting me to share your pulpit. I also want to offer my gratitude to your amazing church staff here who use their talents to bring meaning into all of our lives. Thank you. There are two readings today. The first is one of my favorite poems and probably one of her most famous, by Mary Oliver, entitled Wild Geese. She writes, "You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you about mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscape, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese high on the clean blue air are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things." The second is a poem, a reading by Wendell Berry. When despair for the world grows in me and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world, and I am free. Let those two readings wash over us, and let us take a moment to center ourselves, to breathe and return our hearts to the holy. I invite you to close your eyes if you're comfortable doing so, or find a spot where you are to soften your gaze, having gratitude for the place that you are right now, and breathe. Set aside your doubts or fears. Allow yourself to be in this moment, and allow this moment to be one of grace. And let our hearts find the holy in this moment, all around us, physically and emotionally. Where's the holy? With the recognition of that holy, let us pray. Spirit of life, for all those around the world, all those with us today, known and unknown, all those whose hearts are lonely or afraid in this hour, who are sick or tortured or grieving or isolated, those who are overwhelmed, we pray that they soon know love and grace. May it be so.
Love has broken down the wall. Love has broken down the wall. Let us join our hearts as one. Love has broken down the wall. We're accepted as we are. We're accepted as we are. Through love's power, all is reconciled. We're accepted as we are. Cast aside your doubts and fears. Cast aside your doubts and fears. Grace and love freely offered here. Cast aside your doubts and fears. We will tear down the walls. We will tear down every wall. Love has called us one and all. Love has broken down the wall. Love has broken down the wall.
So in the year 1555 in England lived a man named John Bradford, a reformer who was dedicated to the Church of England. And this was a time when the monarchy was flipping back and forth between Catholicism and Protestantism. When the Catholic Queen Mary came to power, John Bradford, as well as many others, were arrested and put in that infamous Tower of London. And one day he's looking out a small window and he witnesses other prisoners being led to their execution. And he says, "There, but for the grace of God, goes John Bradford." Today, this is somewhat a common phrase, "There, but for the grace of God, go I." For most of my life, I didn't resonate with this saying, and frankly, as someone who doesn't believe that God is invested in my individual life, I find it a bit shocking that God offers grace to one person and not to the other. Why not those people that Bradford witnessed being led to their execution? Is it God's doing that I have a home and others do not? that I carry enormous privileges that others do not, that I was born into a family that cared for me as a baby and that others do not. For that matter, is it God's doing that I can order a pizza while others go to a food bank? That I live and that others die? Does that mean I've received some kind of grace from God? I don't think I'm that important, actually. The last couple years, though, I found resonance with the statement, "There, but for the grace of God, go I." 2 years ago, my partner had a brain injury after a heart attack. She had an anoxic brain injury. Today, she has severe amnesia and delirium, among many other things. Publicly, there are times when I want to shout at people who question the need for universal health care, or people who are impatient with her walking slowly, or those who, yes, there are those who laugh at her when she looks intensely at stuff in the store. And I want to shout, "There, but for the grace of God, go you." I get angry at little ways people are hurtful or the big ways that policies put us into even more jeopardy. And I think of this statement as some kind of weapon to shame people into kindness or thoughtfulness. Sometimes that actually works, and sometimes it doesn't. They don't really care. And then there's those more private moments when I'm so sad, and she has said something really mean, and she doesn't know what she just said, and I whisper to myself, "There, but for the grace of God, go I," hoping it will soothe my deep sorrow. In truth, the thing that keeps me most engaged in that statement is the part that says, "There go I." To witness the end of life or suffering, to see sorrow and pain, even to witness joy and love, to make that separation gap between humans, between us, emotionally smaller. There go I, implying no separation when we know ourselves to be of one another. Perhaps it's grace that allows us to cross barriers. God is not in the business of offering grace to one over another. Rather, or more beautifully put, that word meanwhile, we are offered the grace to know our interdependence with all. Then the statement, if that's true, then the statement should be, "There go I because of the grace of God." I think that would be at least an interesting debate to have with John Bradford, should he come to dinner. Grace is not something we normally talk about in terms of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is usually understood as something we develop individually. It's the identification, harnessing, and management of our individual emotions. But I know that there is something larger than us that is intertwined in that quilt of our emotions. And perhaps that something is the existence of grace. Grace has many meanings and could be that unmerited favor, such as someone coming along to help you out, or can be divine exemption, such as God bestowing salvation upon sinners, or can be a prayer of gratitude, such as saying grace before a meal, or a movement such as the finesse of a great ballroom dancer, or characteristic of charm such as social graces, or an honor to someone or something such as the statement, "She graced the art for decades." I sense that grace is an act of transformation, allowing us to be more and more open and connected. But grace, honestly, is something I'm still working out. So what do I do when I'm working something out? I pose the question to Facebook. How do you know grace in your life? Some of the responses. A friend, Suzanne, wrote, "Thank goodness for grace. How terrible would it be for everyone to get exactly what they deserve?" We all experience grace as we realize how lucky we are for the wonderful things that happen to us, the amazing people in our lives, and the experiences that make us smile. It's available to all, or perhaps by definition, only to the undeserving. My atheist friend, Reverend Kelly Asputh Jackson, said, "The definition I offer for grace is the luck redeemed by the purpose we put to it." He calls grace an undeserved necessity. Chew on that for a while. The Reverend Cheryl Balding wrote, "I'm a human-centric theist. I find grace at work between and among the web of life at all levels. I also believe there is a grace with the universe, or as I'm defining that these days, God in all his, her, ? Forms. I believe that it is a healing and forgiving presence, a way of holding all when you just need it. We hold babies like this, not just when they're crying or they're tired or don't want to be put down, just when we get in that sink, just to be." And the Reverend Alma Crawford wrote, "We old black preachers like to talk about those twin sisters, grace and mercy. How to tell them apart? Grace is when you get what you do not deserve. Mercy is when you don't get what you deserve." She writes, "Oh, friends, when you find me able to stand, know that those two tenacious twins are holding me up." The common biblical story about grace is the parable of the workers in the vineyard in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 20. That's the story that the farmer goes out early in the morning to hire day laborers, and they discuss a wage for the day, and the workers go off and they start work. And then a couple hours later, he goes back to the town square and he hires more people. He said, "You go to the vineyard, do some work, and I'll give you what is right." So they went off to work. As the day progressed, he went a couple more times at noon, and then even at 5 p.m., he went and he hired more workers. And then at 6 o'clock, the work was done, and he began to pay them, and he paid each person the same amount, the amount that was promised to those workers who worked all day from the morning. He paid the same amount to those who only worked for an hour. Those who had worked all day were pretty upset that everyone was paid the same. I can imagine how people would be pretty upset. Others find it an example of grace. How about you? Is grace deserved or not? And what actually makes one deserving? Is it our existence or our work? What would you feel if you worked all day in the heat and were paid what you were promised, but the same as another who only worked 1 cool hour in the evening? I would find it a little disconcerting, but I want to be the person who can know the grace. So how do we come to know the grace? The song Amazing Grace, one of the most recognizable songs in our world, it's obviously about coming to know grace. It's a song of conversion and transformation. The man who wrote it, John Newton, has a very famous story. He worked on a merchant ship early in his life, but when he turned 18, he was arguing with the captain, so when a slave ship came by, he volunteered to work on that. And he ended up working on that slave ship for many, many years, horribly being a captor of human people. That should not be minimized. Then his conversion into Christianity came one night when there was a big storm and he nearly died and they nearly sunk. But after he converted to Christianity, he continued to run the slave ship and eventually became a captain of his own slave ship. Over the years, he deepened his Christianity, he became more pious, but he had little compassion, praying for his own safety against the slaves. Then several years later, he had this mild stroke and he couldn't be captain anymore. He couldn't be on a ship anymore. So he changed his path and he followed faith and eventually became a priest. It was then that he wrote several hymns. 34 years after retiring from human trafficking, he expressed his regrets, saying, "For a confession that comes much too late, it will always be a subject of humiliation to me, that I was once active instrument in a business at which my heart now shudders." Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. There's a quality of this experience of surrender that brings hope. We don't like to surrender very much as Unitarian Universalists, but there is some soothing quality to that. Recognizing our failures, our vulnerabilities, our senses of dread, grief, and needs can be deeply freeing. Recognizing ourselves allows us to be closer to one another. That is a quality of grace. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. Grace to allow us to see the wholeness of the world, the things that both invoke and release deep fear, the reality of death and our own sorrow. Grace can allow us to live again. The theologian Paul Tillich said, quote, "Grace strikes us when we are in great pain and restless. It strikes us when we walk through the dark valley of a meaningless or empty life. It strikes us when we feel that our separation is deeper than usual because we have violated another life, a life which we loved or from which we are estranged. It strikes us when our disgust for our own being, our indifference, our weakness, our hostility, and our lack of direction and composure have become intolerable to us. It strikes us when, year after year, the longed for perfection of life does not appear, when the old compulsions reign within us as they have for decades, when despair destroys all joy and courage. Sometimes at that moment, a wave of light breaks into our darkness, and it is as though a voice were saying, "You are accepted. You are accepted, accepted by that which is greater than you, and the name of which you do not know." Grace strikes us, a powerful image to be in a desperate hour and stricken by grace. Something that says we are not alone, we are accepted by something larger than us, that there is a larger universe holding us all, even conspiring to find our best and most loving lives. And for a few moments, you don't have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves and do what it can. As a lifelong Unitarian Universalist, grace was not taught to me. It wasn't a centering concept. I didn't know it, recognize it, analyze, or consider it for many years. And honestly, I'm not a very graceful person. It doesn't come naturally to me. I'm usually too direct or sarcastic for grace. I was taught to honor curiosity when I felt judgment, that I should instead ask questions. And that's a value and practice that I still hold very dear. It's very central to our faith. Yet over the years, I also learned that the question is not always the thing to center, because questioning can feel like a trial. And sometimes we need a little bit more space to breathe into our growth. What I do know is when people of color name their experiences, it's often true that we are questioned if their experiences are real. The very thing that we are taught as Unitarian Universalists to question can feel like a trial. What is implied is that this sort of white general society will make the judgment. And I've learned that the most powerful grace that can be given to people of color is simply the statement, I believe you. And I remember the moment that I first came to witness grace. It was not a desperate hour or in despair. It was actually in that fantastically Unitarian Universalist tradition, the contentious church committee meeting. At this meeting, there was tension when one person with conviction was certain that the rest of us were wrong. He was quite abrupt about it, in fact, insulting, and on the verge of calling us stupid. It was frustrating for all of us, and we could not move on as a group. We were tied in knots. When these situations come up, my tendency is to fully engage, to ask more questions, to try and understand, try to get everyone to understand each side, trying to get everyone on the same page. I have a tendency to get involved. Excuse me. Well, in this meeting, something happened, and he actually began to shift his thinking. I'm not sure what it was that made that shift, but you could see it in his face. He realized he was mistaken, but he was confused that he was mistaken. And rather than trying to get him to verbally recognize his mistake, the chair of the committee saw an opportunity and chose to gracefully move us along. She could have pinned him to it. Perhaps he would have made some sort of embarrassing recoil, maybe even apologized to the rest of us, probably wouldn't have ever come back to a meeting, allowing everyone else to take a deep, righteous breath. But she made us all hold that breath and moved us on. Thank you. Sometimes the chair of the committee saw him fully and allowed him some space to get his bearings, released him from his hurtful words, and held him in love. In doing so, she was reminding all of us, there go I. Therefore, we must be the people who allow the space to know, to unlearn, to recenter, and even know again with dignity. I was blown out of the water by the grace that she invoked. Now I knew what grace looked like, where it came from, and that it was not just her giving him grace, but making space that allowed him to return to grace. That is the power of the committee meeting, allowing us all to return to grace, for there go I. Sorry. I'm trying to clear my throat. As you can tell, thank you for your patience. Stick with me. We're almost through this. I also find interest in the interpretation of grace as a religious release, the kind of release that brings you closer to the sense of sacred, to return to our own grace. Release of our own and others' angst and dread and grief, and the release that comes in our knowing that at some point grace is needed to bring us to our next place of knowing and being together. That grace in that committee meeting was actually a religious experience. Grace strikes us, but it's also a constant, ironically. Grace is the universe conspiring to support our wholeheartedness. Grace is the universe conspiring to support our wholeheartedness. It's always there for us when we choose to recognize it. Perhaps grace is everything in life when we humble ourselves, think about, but there go I, and know life to be a gift. Because our very existence, being born, was not done by our own work, let's not forget, nor was it something we earned or that we even willed. We were born. Of course, at some point in life, or at many points, we had to make the decision to live, but we have no control over our existence. Let alone were we born where we were born, or who were our families, and all the other privileges and oppressions and joys and pains that we've inherited. Some could say that all life is a gift, and it's up to us to choose to know it as grace. There go I. It's not just a reference of redemption, but a choice. There go I into grace, closer to that which we consider sacred, the ultimate acceptance. In my office, I have this etching that subtly says, bidden or not bidden, God is present. I find these words, bidden or not bidden, a sweet sound of universalism. Deserved or not deserved, accepted or not accepted, alone or not alone. The spirit of life offers itself to you constantly, harsh and exciting, to which you can return to again and again. Through many dangers and toils and snares, life offers its amazing grace, and we are now the keepers of it. We can offer it, we can know it, we can become it, we can get to choose how we want to interpret it. Let's all get graced out. May it be so.
Break not the circle of enabling love, where people grow forgiven and forgiving. Break not that circle, make it wider still, till it includes, embraces all the living. Come wonder at this love that comes to life, where words of freedom are with humor spoken, and people keep no score of wrong and guilt, but will that human bonds remain unbroken. Join then the movement of the love that frees, till people of whatever race or nation will truly be themselves, stand on their feet, see eye to eye with laughter and elation.
Before I extinguish our chalice this morning, I'd like to read you these words written by Rebecca Savage with a slight modification to fit the times in which we live right now. Spirit of life, spirit of love, we have gathered through time and space under the banner of a shared faith. We are born of a welcoming grace that extends and receives love. We are touched by the ways we have fallen short of who we strive to be, and here we are reborn, forged by a greater courage. Let us move from this time and virtual gathering encouraged and refreshed for the journey ahead. I will extinguish our chalice now, but not the light of truth, the warmth of this community, or the fire of our commitment. These we will carry with us until we meet again.
Go your way in peace, wander as you may. Blessed is the path you take, may love guide you on your way. Go our way in peace, wander as we may. guide us on our way.